This is AgGrad Live,
We have all of the different segments within the cotton.
the show that explores what it's really like to work in the ag industry,
So making sure that we get policy and regulatory issues
straight from the people who live it every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming at you live here on a Wednesday on Facebook. If you're watching, you'll notice I've got this big obnoxious headset on. I was getting some feedback from our podcast episodes, and sometimes you could hear me typing in the background. And then also, I think the sound quality will just be better overall. So you'll have to forgive the headset. I'm not trying to, live my fantasy of sports broadcasting or, becoming Dave Ramsey or anything like that. But I did want to improve the sound quality for those that choose to listen as a podcast. But this is my favorite time of the week. This is when I get to sit down for 30 minutes or so with one of our winners of the AgGrad 30 Under 30. This is the very first 30 Under 30 program exclusively for agriculture, and it's certainly been a fantastic group. I hope you've caught the episodes we've done so far, either live on Facebook or, like I said, on the podcast or on our YouTube channel. We're replaying them there. You can also find information about these individuals on our website at aggrad.com. Well, very excited for today's guest because he is doing some very, very interesting things when it comes to sort of rethinking the future of agriculture with the companies he both works for now and has worked for in the past. So please welcome 30 Under 30 award winner, John Farmer. Thanks for coming on the show, John.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for the warm welcome. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is it's something I've been looking forward to a lot. I do another podcast called Future of Agriculture where we're kind of thinking about some of these things, about what does the agriculture look like in the future and what might change things or disrupt things. So your position, though, is Chief of Staff for Clara Foods. Can you just tell anyone watching or listening at a high level, what is Clara Foods?
Sure. At a high level, Clara Foods is a food biotechnology company that's making animal proteins without the animal. So similar to brewing beer, we take a strain of yeast that contains an animal protein of interest, and then through the process of fermentation, create those animal proteins and then isolate them and sell them to different companies of the world like Pepsi or Coca-Cola or Conagra Foods.
Cool. And I know there's a few other companies in sort of this alternative protein space, but of course there's a lot of different proteins out there for a lot of different purposes. What is sort of the differentiation point out there, or how does Clara Foods approach this that may be different from other sort of alternative protein companies?
Sure. So there's definitely a spectrum of alternative proteins. I think on the far side, you have plant-based imitations similar to Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods that are seeing a ton of consumer adoption and interest from the investment community. And then on the polar opposite side of the spectrum, you have the Memphis Meats of the world that are making actual muscle tissue cell culture. And Clara Foods sits closer on the Memphis Meat side of things, such that we are not making proteins that imitate animal proteins. We're actually making we're making real egg proteins in our case. So we're not giving consumers something that is like the product that they know and love. We're giving them that actual product. Yeah,
I think that's a fascinating approach. So it is the actual product. It just has never seen the likes of a chicken.
Exactly. This is the same thing that we know and love, just created in a completely different way using fermentation. But it actually leverages a lot of pre-existing technology out there. The insulin is a great example. Genentech pioneered this synthetic biology decades ago. Insulin used to be made through using the pig pancreas, and then they engineered microbes to create that via fermentation. So we're taking a similar approach to them, but serving the food and beverage industry.
Oh, cool. So yeah, these are generally processes developed for the pharmaceutical industry being applied to food.
Exactly. Everything's sort of following Moore's law, and we're riding that curve as cost of production comes down. We're able to sort of expand the markets that are served with this technology. That's where Clara Foods and a lot of others come in.
Interesting. Yeah, because I've heard people talk about, we've had egg substitutes for a long time, but what we haven't had for a long time are actual egg product, whatever you call it, just not just without the chicken, I guess.
Yeah, that's the void we're trying to fill.
So interesting. And Now, obviously, this is fascinating technology. It's cutting edge. It's brand new to the market. Is that what attracted you to this opportunity, or were there other things that you thought, this is actually a really good direction to take my career?
Sure. So I think if we're chatting in 20 years, Tim, I'll still be sitting at the really the intersection of sort of private sector for-profit companies and sustainable agriculture that are really trying to disrupt the status quo. There's a lot of incredible innovation happening on sort of the more traditional agriculture side of things, but I'm interested in how we can bring technology into the equation and really find alternative methods of making the things that we know and love as consumers. So very laser focused and all in on this industry and tangential industries.
Yeah, I find that self-awareness and that laser focus to be both really, really important to success, especially early on in one's career, but also just really rare. Where did that come from for you? When did you realize like, oh, that is the intersection that I am most interested in?
Yeah, there wasn't one defining moment. It was sort of piecemealed together over time from different people in my professional and personal and academic life. In particular, I had a few really amazing mentors at the University of North Carolina, which is where I went and grew up. There was a theme during my time there that was water and food security. So outside of my core business curriculum, every chance I had to take a class that focused on food security or family-owned businesses with a focus on agriculture or the culinary arts, I really went after that. And there were some, just the faculty at UNC was sort of my first touch point to open my eyes to this industry. And then that was sort of the industry focus. And then I, just on the entrepreneurial side of things, really look up to my father. Didn't go to college. He was always interested in working on cars and ended up having a salvage business for about 30 years. So he was sort of part of the initial wave of the circular economy, really focusing on recycling and salvaging scrap metal and things like that. So just getting to grow up in that entrepreneurial, scrappy environment was pretty formative in terms of me trying to replicate a lot of the things he did.
Right. I love the subtle pun there with the scrappy environment. So you have the most undetectable, if that's a word, North Carolina accent that I think I've ever heard. Is that from living out in California?
I don't think so. I've gotten this comment a lot recently, though. I'm from Charlotte and went to school in the Research Triangle area, and I guess those are some of the more metropolitan parts of North Carolina. So maybe it's that. I don't know. My mom grew up in 20 different places, so she has sort of a neutral accent as well. So I could have picked up from them as well.
Okay. No, great. I think that's interesting. I often find that to be the case where it goes back to, your parents and the way you're raised and how much that influences your career. I think about that a lot with having kids now, like the pressure of, not wanting to influence that in the wrong direction. Well, tell us more about your career path, though. Graduated from UNC. Now we're out in California. Connect the dots for us from college graduation to where you are now.
Sure. So like I mentioned at UNC, I focused on business, and then every other class was focused on all things food security. And prior to my senior year, I interned at Wells Fargo Securities in their food, beverage, and agribusiness investment banking group. And it was there that I really got a first touch on the industry. We worked with some of the Fortune 500 animal protein players, particularly based in North Carolina. There's a lot of regionally, a lot of interesting businesses to bank, and ended up going back there full time in Charlotte for about a year and a half. And yeah, it's a great sort of springboard and initial learning environment that gave me a lot of the hard skills that I think can really drive a lot of value for startups. But I was craving I think more responsibility and autonomy and ownership, and also more diversity and a lack of familiarity that I think is really an important sort of direction to push yourself as you're starting out your career. I was this website called AgFunder, I'm sure you're familiar with, that has a lot of exciting articles that are released about disruptive food and technology companies. I followed that very closely and came across this company called Plenty, which is an indoor vertical farming company based here in the Bay Area. And yeah, from investment banking, I just cold reached out to them. They just closed a $200 million Series B from SoftBank, and we're looking to expand the team. So I joined their strategy and business development team. Was there for about a year and a half, working really across corporate finance, strategy, and operations with a team of 7 before joining the Clara Foods team a little over 6 months ago.
Great.
So
Yeah.
exciting journey.
Yeah, it is an exciting journey for sure. And I want to get back on the investment banking, but just one side note. So Dr. Nate Story, who's one of the founders of Bright Agritech, he was an early guest on my other podcast when there was still Bright Agritech, but now he's with
I know and love Nate. Very, very dearly. He's great.
He was a fan. Him and Chris, right, was marketing with him. Yeah, him
Chris Michael
were fantastic to work with.
Exactly. Yeah, the whole Bright team.
Yeah. So that's really cool. I'm sure they continue to do big things. So on investment banking, I think it's an often misunderstood profession, or at least people just don't know what it is. They know that, hey, all these talented, ambitious people, go into investment banking. But maybe not sure why. What could you tell us? Sort of talk to me like I'm 5 when it comes to what investment bankers do.
Sure. So, there's 2. I would divide investment banking into coverage groups and product groups. So I was part of a coverage group. So coverage groups focus on specific industries. For example, my industry that I focused on was food, beverage, and agribusiness. And then there are product groups which focus on the different products that investment bankers offer. So that could be M&A advisory, so buying or selling a company, equity capital markets, so taking a company public, and debt capital markets. So go out to the debt capital markets and raise a high yield bond. So on every transaction, or on most transactions, a team that represents industry expertise and product expertise will come together and work on the deal at hand.
And so you are out there, when you say work on the deal, it's a company coming to your firm looking to raise money, either through debt, taking on or issuing a bond, or through equity and actually issuing stock. And you go out there and help them find the other party to that transaction. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So for example, Beyond Meat's getting a lot of press right now. Likely 5, 6 more banks went to Beyond Meat to pitch their advisory services, and the service they provide is crafting Beyond's story to institutional investors, going out and finding institutional investors, setting the share price, the number of shares that should be sold out into the public markets. So that's not just that wouldn't be just my job. It'd be a huge team effort, oftentimes across different banks and different teams. But the analyst is really in charge of building the materials and the financial model. So they're living in Excel and PowerPoint and working with the management teams to help craft the story, and also building out sort of forward-looking financial models based on management guidance and equity research, to give the investment community a sense for the forward-looking performance of the company.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then how about now? So chief of staff with Clara Foods, what does a chief of staff do? What's your role kind of day to day?
Sure. So I think a chief of staff is a lot of different things to different companies. Clara Foods in particular, we are about 80% scientists, and our team size, I believe, is 35 right now. So it's a very technical team. So pretty much all things that fall outside of the deep science on the corporate finance, investor relations, project management, go-to-market strategy, just real nitty-gritty biz ops side of things fall under my scope of work. So I'm try to be a real utility player to the team and work cross-functionally across strain engineering, process development, and product. And I just work on special projects here and there for the CEO beyond those core competencies that I just discussed. So it's a fun jack of all trades role that I would really highly recommend to anyone that has interest in being a founder or CEO or entrepreneur one day. It's sort of seeing it from the front lines.
Definitely, and I think that goes often unnoticed, or at least unacknowledged. That I think a lot of people feel pushed to become a specialist, and maybe don't see those generalist type roles. What's your viewpoint on that? It seems like you've been able to find success in specifically being a generalist, if that's not a contradiction of terms there. So, what's kind of your viewpoint on that?
Sure. So I think I've found success actually in being a deep specialist in terms of industry. So there's a lot of people might do one job across different industries. So they're industry agnostic, but specialize in role. And I know the industry I want to build my career in. But you actually asked about the best piece of advice I received.
Yeah.
In the pre-interview survey you sent out, and it was to focus on learnings and not earnings. And I think I'm still very early into my career, so I don't know if I'm necessarily committed to being a role generalist at this point. I'm more just trying to learn as much as I can and work with as many different kinds of people as I can. So that's been sort of my thesis on the chief of staff role. And it's typically not a career path. It's a, say, 18 months to 24-month opportunity in a very formative period of a company's growth to do a lot of things. But then Arturo, our founder and CEO, and I are frequently talking about what do I want to do in a year or two? Do I want to build out a team, focus on product strategy, focus more on the finance side of things? So it's a really flexible position where you can really craft your own direction if you have the right mentors and leaders guiding you.
Sure. No, I think that's a great point, that you are in a generalist role because you are a domain specialist, because you've chosen to sort of, double down in the domain knowledge. That makes actually a ton of sense. I found it interesting, you mentioning working directly with the CEO. That's something that is somewhat unique to, working in startup life or for a small company or a startup company, that someone early in their career can have that exposure to somebody, sort of leading the charge, so to speak. Is that one thing you like about working for startups, I would imagine? And what are some other things you enjoy about startup life rather than if you were to go work for maybe a larger corporation?
So I was, working with the CEO is an amazing opportunity. It is the reason I took this position outside of just Clara Foods' underlying mission. Like I said, you get to really sit on the front lines and experience what it's like to problem solve on the fly and raise capital and set near-term, medium-term, and long-term goals for a company. I really get to help facilitate that because of the trust and autonomy Arturo gives me.
All right.
And that's 100% why I wanted to join a startup and why I would recommend others join startups as well, just because it's sort of fly by the seat, figure things out on the go. There's not one of the best things about investment banking is when you start out, there's an eight week formal training process where they hand you the how to do everything book, and there's a lot of support and just a lot of mechanisms in place to help you get up to speed and sort of dot your I's and cross your T's. And that's amazing when you're starting out your career. And I think that would have been a great place to stay for longer than I did. But I just sort of felt the urge to go somewhere that didn't have a rule book and sort of blaze my own way. Right.
Then you also mentioned about kind of the mission, Clara Foods, and I know you care a lot about what I think what I've heard referred to as the triple bottom line, but making sure that you have the bottom line not just financially but also socially, and then sustainably or environmentally, however you want to classify that. Talk to me more about that from your end of things, kind of being involved day to day. Is that is that possible? I think you get some skeptics that say, well, you can't optimize for everything. You sort of have to optimize for profit. I know that's important to you, so I'd love to hear more of your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I think there's a lot of data points out. There's a lot of companies that are doing just that. Pivot Bio is a great example in the similar synthetic biology space that is doing that for fertilizer. There is definitely an intersection. This is the beautiful thing I think about agriculture and agriculture technology specifically is with Clara Foods, I feel like our product is providing a no compromise solution to a lot of the wants and needs of consumers. The investment community has made it clear that that there's so many impact investing firms popping up all over the place. There are ESG bonds that you can buy. Corporate social responsibility groups of major Fortune 500 companies are blowing up. This is really important to companies. This is really important to consumers. I think every day I have different articles I come across that sort of underwrite the importance of just this idea that is really just like revolutionizing agriculture and the food security supply chain as we know it.
Cool.
I mean, perhaps I'm overly optimistic, but I'm definitely drinking the Kool-Aid and think those opportunities are out there.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're alone in that. I think that there's certainly, quite a few people who are seeing this opportunity from the investment space, from the entrepreneurial space, and also from the customer adoption side. I read an article today on LinkedIn about how a big problem right now with some of these plant-based meats is that they can't supply it. The infrastructure is not there to supply it. So certainly there's plenty of people, who would agree with you. And I think that the data is showing that. For sure. Now you do so many things in your job, in your role, kind of crossing over all teams. Is there anything you can think about and point to for us that like something that happened or a role or a position you were in doing your work that you just thought, this is why I do what I do. Like it just hit home for you that like, I am exactly where I want to be doing the type of work I want to be doing. Anything like that you could point to?
There's an upcoming opportunity that I have actually tried to tackle in previous roles at other companies that I'm really excited to sort of to own. So the food biotechnology space, there hasn't really been products that. So I guess Impossible Foods is one example where they're plant-based but have 1% of their product is soy hemoglobin, so it's made with the same technology that Clara Foods makes its egg proteins. And they actually have a lot of good life cycle analyses done on their products, but no one in sort of the pure synthetic biology space has come out with validating third-party research that speaks to the getting back to the true bottom line, the positive environmental externalities of replacing sort of traditional layer hen egg manufacturing with fermentation. So we're excited to work with some really impressive partners on understanding and quantifying the exact impact of the work we're doing. And I think that that's nice to have validated data points to share with consumers and with the employees internally that support the thesis that we're basing the business off of.
Okay, I have to ask one question that I think is probably a really dumb question. So try not to laugh too hard at me here, but if the product is essentially the exact same thing as an egg white, is it vegan or is the initial medium that you're using to expand upon animal based so it wouldn't be vegan? It's
a great question. We're not so they are real animal proteins, but we're not starting with the chicken and so Finless Foods Memphis meats, I believe, are in not a very harmful way, but taking stem cells from the animals.
Yep.
We're recreating an amino acid sequence in our strain of yeast. So the egg is made up of 40 plus different proteins, and there's academic research out there that spells out this amino acid sequence. So our strain engineering team can recreate that and insert that into the strain of yeast that we want to ferment. So we don't even start with the chicken, even though we're making egg proteins.
Jeez, what a time to be alive.
I know it. It's crazy.
No, this is cool. I want to give some shout outs. You already kind of mentioned, your father and the impact of growing up and watching him grow his business on sort of your aspirations to get involved in really making change in the world. Who else kind of has helped you get to where you are in terms of position in your career?
So many people that were strangers before I reached out to them out of the blue. I won't name any names, but there are a lot of venture capital firms that play specifically. So when I was coming out of investment banking, the traditional values go into private equity or growth equity or venture capital on the investment side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I started having those conversations knowing I wanted to stay in this industry. And different sort of associates, principals, partners at venture capital firms really recommended that it makes the most sense to go get operating experience. And they wished they had done that earlier in their career, and they were really they were sitting in a seat that I thought I wanted to be in, but then here they were telling me, no, you should go do this instead. This is where you'll learn the most and have the most fun and solve the most, just be really hands-on with solving the most important problems. So I took that advice to heart in a really big way. And they were really helpful putting me in touch with different portfolio companies of theirs and different entrepreneurs. AgTech is a very, very small space. Most of it's based here in the Bay Area, some in Israel, and everyone sort of knows everyone since it's still in its nascent stages. So yeah, shout out to a lot of random strangers that answered my LinkedIn messages and cold emails, and we're open to warm introductions and just coffee chats like that. I think the networking piece has been huge in terms of opening doors that otherwise wouldn't have been there.
Cool. So you went from Plenty, which is indoor vertical farming, as I understand it, to Clara Foods, which is an alternative protein. What was the biggest sort of difference for you, or the biggest change in just in terms of kind of subsegment of the industry between those two? Because they often get lumped together. Anyone disrupting the food system in one place, even though I bet there's probably quite a few differences. I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's some differences and similarities. It was a pretty it was a natural jump in some sense. They're both pretty infrastructure heavy industries. So indoor farms are they own a lot of assets. They're building huge multi-million-dollar pieces of infrastructure to grow produce that's typically grown in the ground. And Clara Foods and others in our space either own or work with contract manufacturers to use fermenters that are thousands of liters. These use conical stainless steel fermenters. So on scaling up, like very infrastructure heavy, disruptive food technology, it's similar in that sense. One of the biggest differences is for me, and one of the most exciting things I think, jumping from Plenty to Clara, is how we see step function changes in yield. So I'll like unpack that a little bit. So if you look at the hydroponic or indoor farming companies growing lettuce, or just look at sort of traditional ag, they're seeing yield. I guess looking outdoor ag, I think I recently read a stat that they're seeing yield increases of 1 or 2% year over year. And there are billions of dollars being poured into this, and it's just sort of a slow, steady creep. Whereas when we make mutations to our strain of yeast, we can get week over week results back that show the productivity of our strains twofold or threefold. So I'm talking about like 300% improvements in the unit economics of the proteins that we're trying to commercialize. So very, very small tweaks at the genetic level can yield really, really exciting results. That can also be frustrating sometimes when you see flat lines, but the payout of seeing these huge improvements makes it really worth it. So I wasn't used to this level of excitement when we'd get back results from the lab until joining Clara.
And the brewery parallel is probably, it's a really interesting one. Could it be decades from now we're sitting around at a microbrewery, a microprotein brewery, and trying out different specialty products? Is it far-fetched?
Yeah, no, I think it's less. It could be done right now if someone wanted to do it. One thing so the bioreactors or fermenters that, like I said, this the fermentation technology is nothing new. It's just all of our innovations happening with the strain and process, not like this fermenter that houses. We're trying to leverage all the off-the-shelf technology we can. So I think that's certainly within the realm of possibilities. I hope so. It'd be pretty cool.
Cool. Well, John, what's before I let you go here, some parting career advice? Anything you would tell other ambitious agricultural professionals that are out there, either watching or listening, that has served you well?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. I really try to surround myself with people that are way smarter than me, and I think I've done a good job about that, of doing that to date. So I would say, like, push yourself to surround yourself with people that are smarter for you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Like I said, it's at least in sort of my part of agriculture, it's a very small, tight community, and people are really willing to respond to that cold email and help. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, fantastic advice. There's two in there, actually. Don't be afraid to ask for help and surround yourself with people smarter than you. So fantastic. John, well, congratulations. Well-deserved for AgGrad 30 Under 30. Thanks so much for taking some time. I know it's got to be a really busy time for you. I think probably the downside of being chief of staff is there's always probably a fire to be managing. But thank you for taking the time, and congratulations. Where's a good way, if anybody's watching this and is just truly inspired by your story and what you have been doing and wants to reach out to you, are you active on any social media channels, or is there a place we can tell them to follow up with you?
Sure. They can connect with me on LinkedIn, John Christian Farmer, and also feel free to reach out to me over email. It's john@clarafoods.com.
Okay.
I'd be happy to chat. Yeah.
Yep. JOHN at
Clara Foods.
Foods.com. I'm putting that on the screen as we speak, and I just want to thank you one more time, John. Really appreciate the time. It's such fascinating stuff, and I think you're going to look back wherever you are in 20 or 30 years and be like, wow, I was a part of that, and really, really interesting kind of changing stuff there. So thanks again.
Thanks. It was a real treat.
Thank you for joining AgGrad Live. Visit aggrad.com. That's AgGrad. To join the community, create your profile, and learn more about careers in the agriculture industry.